Hey, it's Andrew here at BTORange in Conroe, Texas, and today on the bench we have something a little different. We don't do a whole lot of military surplus stuff, but we do carry a bunch of that, or we try to at the range. It's a good product line, or it's a good channel for us. And we recently bought a collection that had quite a few interesting pieces in it, so we might integrate some milsurp stuff with the commercial as we move forward. But this is a Japanese Type 14 Nambu pistol chambered for 8x22 Nambu. And interesting pistol that saw service in Japan from the 1920s up through the end of World War II. Before that, we can go back into the late 1800s when Japan began to modernize its military with firearms, and they went to Smith & Wesson basically, and we've done a video on the Smith & Wesson, I believe it was a 1.5, Model 1.5 with Japanese writing, and they also had the Model 3, the larger frame single-action Smith & Wesson revolver. It saw Japanese service, and that was a big contract for Smith & Wesson, but as we began to modernize a little bit further, they developed their own revolver in 1893, the Type 26 revolver, and that became obsolete by the mid-1920s, although just like any other military organization, they remained as secondary firearms for quite a while after that. In any event, a captain in the Japanese Army named Kajiro Nambu, and I'm going to butcher some of these names, I assure you. Captain Nambu, he later ended his military career as a lieutenant general, but he was the Japanese version of John Browning, or their version of John Browning. What Browning was to us, Nambu was to the Japanese, in as much as he designed and was involved in the design of many different pistols and rifles and submachine guns used by the Japanese military. So he created a pistol in 1902, and it became called the Grandpa Nambu. It's what it's called now by collectors. It's a larger frame pistol, and they developed the 8x22 Nambu cartridge for use in that with that pistol. So it had a shoulder stock, small trigger guard, fairly rare pistol. So, but only about 2,400 of those. So a lot of people, when they see these Nambu pistols, we hear it a lot that, oh, it's a Luger clone, and it's not. About the only thing similar to a Luger is that it has a similar grip angle, but other than that, it's completely different. This gun has a bolt that moves within a tubular type receiver, as opposed to the Luger, which has the toggle action and the bolt that goes rearward in a rectangular receiver. So it's completely different. The locking block on this moves downward instead of up. So if anything, it'd be more akin to, say, a C96 or one of those Mauser pistols that has a similar movement with the locking block. But in any event, this may look familiar to you if you own a Ruger standard 22 auto pistol. It is said that Ruger took a lot of his design cues as far as the overall appearance of the pistol and the way the bolt moves within the upper receiver from the Nambu. So there is a little bit of correlation to modern guns there. So in 1906, they changed the Grandpa Nambu a little bit. They got rid of the shoulder stock. They made the trigger guard a little bit bigger. Not this big. This is much later. And they changed some other very minor components. It became the Papa Nambu, still in 8mm. So that was used through 1945, really, by the Army, again, as secondary units. But the Navy adopted it in 1909. So there was another Nambu, the very rare one called the Baby Nambu, and it's a 3/4 size or 3/4 scale version of that gun that was chambered for a different cartridge, 7mm Nambu. Only about 6,500 of those were produced, and they are extremely rare to find and super duper expensive. So let's talk about this one. This is a Type 14, and it was adopted by the Army in 1925 and then by the Navy in 1929, although the Japanese Coast Guard used them all the way through the 1960s in some areas. So about 280,000 of them were produced. And there's some design improvements over the previous versions of the Nambu pistol. This one has dual recoil springs, for example, and there are a few other deals. So they can be a little bit confusing, but the Japanese, much like the Germans in the same time period, they numbered everything and they marked everything really well. So you just have to read the markings. And we're going to go over the markings in a little bit of detail because you can identify which of the 5 arsenals that produced the Type 14, which arsenal it was, and then you can actually date it fairly easily. Now, when we start talking about dating the gun, Japanese dated it differently. They didn't use the Western style dating. So they dated the guns based upon when the current emperor started, I guess. So this gun, the Type 14, after 1925, in the middle of 1925, the Showa emperor, which is Emperor Hirohito, became emperor, and then we see the date codes, and we see the date codes here on the. Let's come here. We see the date codes here on the bottom of the frame. So that first set of characters, I think it's a 12, and then 16.8. So 1925 being the first year of Emperor Hirohito's reign, so you add 16 to 1925, you get 1941 for the year of manufacture, and then 8 is the month of the year. So the manufacture month and year for this gun would be August of 1941. So we would add that to 1925. Now, earlier guns prior to 1925, it was a different emperor, so you'd have to go back and do that math as far as the Japanese numbering system there. So, interestingly enough, there is some research on the production dates or serial number production by month. The Japanese pistols, and this particular serial number would seem to be, from the internet research that I've found, the very first pistol produced in August of 1941. So we see some changes made in the Type 14 depending on when it was manufactured, mainly the trigger guard and this magazine retention spring. Let's go ahead and clear this out. Then we'll talk about some of the issues with the pistol. So this is a magazine retention spring. That bears into this cutout on the magazine right here. Now these guns, the Type 14 did not have this spring until December of 1939, which would be 1412 on the date. So if you're evaluating a Nambu pistol, pay close attention to it because that's right here where you would grip the gun, and sweat and corrosion and other issues can eat away or damage part of this spring to where it's broken, and that spring is riveted into that grip frame. So the spring can be replaced, but you're going to have to be able to rivet the new spring or the replacement spring into that grip frame. So that is a significant devaluer if the gun has that, and then it is broken away. So this large trigger guard, this came about in September of 39, or a 14.9 date on the gun. Before that, it was a simple round trigger guard, much like you would see on a Luger. So we see this called a Manchurian trigger guard or a winter trigger guard, but it's really not the case because after they switched to that, all the Type 14s had it regardless of where the gun went or when the gun went. So it's not really a winter trigger guard or Manchurian trigger guard. Of 280 some odd thousand of this particular pistol produced, 102,000 of them had that small trigger guard. So they are a little bit rare. They're the earlier variant of it, right? So some of the other dates that we see, are some of the other markings we see. We can talk about those as well. And we have some still pictures we're going to throw up there. So the serial number on this gun is in many different places. So we see the complete serial number here on the right side of the upper part of the receiver, and ahead of that we have the arsenal marking. So that first marking all the way to the left is the primary arsenal marking, and then depending on where it was produced, there will be a sub-arsenal marking, or a factory that produced the pistol under the supervision of the main arsenal. So what we see on this particular gun is we see the first character there is the Nagoya arsenal, and then the second character before the numbers start is the factory that produced it under that arsenal supervision, and that factory had been known as the Nambu Rifle Manufacturing until 1936, and then it became Chuyo after that. But most collectors call this particular variant of the gun either a Nagoya Nambu or, and I'm going to really mess this up, Kokubunji, Kokubunji. And the reason they call it that is because that particular factory was in that district of Tokyo, is where that factory was, and that's why they call it that name. And I'm going to try not to call it that name because I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. So the other markings we see on this gun on this side here, we have 180-degree safety. It's in the fire position now, so it rotates all the way over to safe, right? And when you evaluate one of these, that rub mark, that arc rub mark on the bluing is typical. That doesn't, unless it's really pronounced or really gouged in, it typically doesn't devalue the gun all that much. And in fact, sometimes you'll see it over-rotated to where you start to see some of the arcing into the wooden grip. So it depends upon how severe that rub mark is as to whether or not you devalue the gun for that. So the markings that we have here basically are going to be the same on all Type 14 Nambus, because that's what it says basically as Type 14. It translates directly to 10 4-year type, 10 4-year type, the 4 characters. So that's going to be, now the font's different depending on which factory made it, but those markings are always going to be there. The serial number on this gun carries across, or the last 3 digits. You have the complete serial number here. You'll have the last 3 digits. What did I do? Put it on safe? Yeah. Let's put the magazine in. Now, one of the problems with this gun, or one of the issues with this gun, is it locks back on an empty magazine, but there's no good way to unlock it. So you have the last 3 digits of the serial number here on the bottom of the bolt, or on the top of the bolt here. The serial numbers also are on the, when you take the gun apart, they're on the upper underside of the upper receiver. They're on the top of the trigger guard unit. They're on just about every major part. You have those digits, right? And it does affect the value. These guns will run about, in decent condition, these guns will run around the $700 mark if they're all matching. Now, the magazine, just like Luger's, it's unusual. Now, the magazines are numbered. It's unusual to have the matching magazine with the gun. This one does. This matching mag. We'll pull it out in a minute, but that gives us the opportunity to talk about some of the what are considered to be design flaws on this gun. One is the location of the safety. The safety is all the way forward here to the left. So in order to take the gun off safety, there's really no convenient way to do it with the firing hand. So it's a two-handed proposition really to do that, to remove that safety. The other is once you've fired the last round and it's locked back, it is difficult to pull the magazine out because the bolt is pushing it on the follower. So that's the mag catch. Mag catch is all the way up here, so it's not a not a good spot. And you have a magazine retention spring here, so it's not going to drop free. So you pull the magazine out. It's going to allow the slide to fall forward. You insert your full magazine. Now you have to charge the pistol again in order to shoot it. So the Japanese weren't really great about the ergonomics of fighting with a pistol, so they didn't necessarily consider that anything that needed to be corrected. So that just kind of is what it is. So if you notice on this magazine, there's like a follower right here at the back, but you do have a magazine loading buttons here on the side. So the correct way to load this magazine to where it loads correctly, if you tried to load it without using the button, the base of the cartridge would come up against the back of this ledge here, and it would seat too far forward. So the correct way to load the magazine is to pull the button down and then feed the shells in until the magazine is full. So one other little side note is when you're evaluating one of these little guns, the finish. So they're all blued. The magazine is nickel. That's correct for a gun of this era. Later guns, late war guns, would be blued or phosphated. But the earlier guns have a really nice finish, nice polished blued finish. But especially what I'm referring to are the straw coloration that you see on the trigger and the safety bar. Depending upon which arsenal manufactured the firearm, usually mid 42, is that? I think it's mid 42. We start seeing these become blued parts, and then obviously through the late war, these were all blued parts. So if you have an earlier gun, a 30s gun with blued parts, start to suspect a refinish on that gun for sure. So the other thing that we need to look at real quick is this holster. This is a reproduction holster, and they're currently available from a number of sources. They made a few different types of holster. This is an ammunition pouch, but what I wanted to bring forward is this little part right here, the holster, and you see it on original holsters as well. What this little pouch was for was an additional firing pin or additional striker. These guns are very prone to break the striker, so the Japanese actually began issuing the pistols with extra firing pins. So be that as it may, if you have one of these pistols, or if you get one of these pistols, those strikers are being remade, it's probably not a bad plan to get a few of them. And we're not going to take this one apart. I took it apart this morning to check the length of the recoil springs and that nature. But should you buy one of these guns and you intend to shoot it, my suggestion is you replace both of those recoil springs and you replace that striker spring for sure. There are a couple of other springs when you take it apart. The locking block spring could probably be replaced. And there's a spring underneath that magazine release that you might as well replace also. They're simple coil springs. The recoil springs are being remade. I would certainly get new ones from that, but the other springs can be easily made from coil spring stock. So that said, the bore condition on these is typically pretty good. They were all jacketed bullet loads that were used on these guns. I don't know if anybody, unless somebody currently has been casting bullets for it, which is certainly a possibility. It's doubtful that you see one in horrible condition, although obviously it can happen. So about 700 issues for this gun. It's typically all the money on this Type 14 Nambu, unless it's in super nice condition with the original holster. It can creep up closer to that $1,000 bill mark. So a little bit about the cartridge, and I'm going to set this gun all the way over here to the side so that, because we're going to talk about the cartridge a little bit, and I don't want anybody to think that the cartridge is going to somehow leap into the firearm and discharge itself, so we don't want to do that. That's an 8mm Nambu cartridge. It's a weird little bottleneck cartridge, similar to, say, .30 Luger or 7.63 Mauser, but they're not identical. It doesn't interchange with anything else. It is what it is. So that said, and none of the major manufacturers loaded, but this when we bought the gun, we got a few boxes of this from Precision Cartridge Inc. We got some 8mm Nambu. Buffalo Bore still makes it, and then there's probably some smaller manufacturers that make it as well. So basically the ballistics on this is a 100 to 103 grain bullet at about 1,000 to 1,050 feet per second. So it's basically, for all this business you've got going on right here, it's basically giving you 380 ACP ballistics, give or take. So it's a big, heavy gun relative to 380, so recoil is not significant at all. It's a pleasant gun to shoot. The triggers are typically really nice on the Nambu. They shoot pretty well. Just pay attention to the firing pin breakage, right? So forming brass on it, you really don't have to. Brass is available from Graf & Sons. And I don't know if Starline offers it or not. They may or they may not. It can be formed from 357 SIG brass or 40 Smith & Wesson brass. It does require a pretty heavy-duty press to do it, because you have to run that through a die, a good sizing die to swage the base of that case. But that said, it's doable. If you have enough of a will to do it, you can certainly do it. So we're going to... we're kind of early in the morning here. Tara hasn't quite made it to work yet. So as soon as she gets in, we're going to take this little gun out on the range, and we're going to put a few rounds through it and see how well we would have done had we been Japanese officers in World War II. See you in a bit. Hey, Andrew here back at BTORange. We're in one of our rifle ranges. We're going to shoot this Nambu Type 14 pistol. Tara's here with me. She's never seen one of these before, nope, much less shot one. So
yeah, I'm excited.
this is a Japanese service pistol from 1941.
That's neat.
And 8mm Nambu. So we've got these cartridges here from Precision Cartridge.
That is pretty neat. We'll have to do a close-up on that.
So when you load this magazine, it's got a helper button right here. But you need to use it for this mag, because you see this shelf back here? Mm-hmm. If you just loaded it like you would a normal mag, see how it blocked it out?
Right.
So now you wouldn't be able to load it around on top of that. So pull that down. Now you can.
Oh, gotcha.
And this ammunition, it's not made from really any other case. It's not a parent case of anything. Well, 7 Nambu, but there are, for reloaders or hand loaders, there are cases available from a few different places. Buffalo Bore forms them. I think Starline at one point made brass. Whether they do or not anymore, I don't know. But you can form that out of 357 SIG. It's a little hard to do. So this gun's going to lock back after the last shot.
Right.
The trigger is relatively light on this gun. So you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I'm ready. All right, let's do this. That is a light trigger. Oh. That was pretty cool. I love it. I've never shot anything like that. Oh, that's pretty neat. Thanks for letting me shoot that. I love it.
So now, did you notice how hard the magazine was to pull out?
Yes, I did.
That's because obviously it's got the bolt lock back. So that was one of the problems, not problems, but it's one of the design features that we wouldn't put up
right.
in a fighting handgun, because now when you put your full mag back in, you'd have to run the slide back to load it again.
Right.
So instead of just, sticking a mag in there and, slingshotting it closed or whatever. So very low recoil.
Yeah, very low recoil. I wasn't sure what to expect.
Ballistics on this is pretty close to 380 ACP. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big heavy pistol for 380 ACP. Now, buffalo bore ammo being buffalo bore, theirs may be a little bit stiffer. Okay, we'll just do that. So let's see, he pretty much put them right all in the center. Let's see if we can get some headshots on this cat.
Get it. Nice.
Super light trigger.
That was super light. I wasn't expecting that.
So if you were a Japanese officer in World War II, a lot of times you had to buy your own. You had to buy your own.
Really?
And this was more expensive than, say, a Browning 1900 or a Colt 1903, which was also available. So, anyway, that's the Type 14 Nambu, a little interesting little Japanese service pistol. So if you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe, hit that like button, send us a comment, let us know what you think. We enjoy reading all that stuff, and we will see you on the next one.